We are All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm the Reverend Ron Ferris. This morning's content warning for this morning's call to All Souls. If you have kids in the room, you may want to have them interested in something other than me for the next 5 minutes or so. So as you get that taken care of, I just want to let you know that we're a busy, vibrant congregation, and you could aim your phone's, camera at that thing, and it'll take you to our newsletter, and you could have all the information you want, such as highlighted by this week. We are starting our Theology on Tap adult programming series. And if you had looked at the newsletter last week, you would know that right after church today, there is a buildings and grounds big deal thing, right? Is that what it's called? That's not what it's called. Big deal. That is what it's called. That's it now. So stick around for that, because you're going to have the opportunity to give buildings and grounds some guidance and ask them questions. I want to say hi to our Zoom folks who aren't with us in person today, but are with us virtually. Thank you for attending. I was about to say we love to see you, and then I was about to say we love to not see you. We love that you're here. So, this week, grief has penetrated the stone-tight sanctuary of my heart. Next Benedict, a child was murdered in a bathroom by other children for being non-binary. This, of course, took place in Oklahoma. And is to say they were killed for being who they were. And as much as they were murdered by fellow children, they were actually also murdered by an idea, a hateful, small-hearted, terrified, weakling ideology that encourages hate and violence. An ideology, I assume, that was programmed into those kids by parents, pastors, and a local culture that has seen Oklahoma lead the nation in anti-LGBTQ plus bills. Now, these bills, whatever effect they have in terms of policy, almost more importantly, simply dehumanize people. That kind of a culture dehumanizes people, and dehumanization kills people. And we don't need to look even as far as Oklahoma to see this in effect. The dehumanization of homeless people in our own city costs lives when the temperature drops and there are not enough places for them to go where they feel safe, or even when all their possessions, including paperwork, medication, et cetera, are simply wiped out of their encampments. A couple of weeks ago, our city council engaged in a sickening piece of anti-immigration political theater. They actually wrote in the resolution that it was intended to protect our safety and way of life, which is such a goddamn dog whistle that it may well have been whistling Dixie. It was pure theater. It made zero policy impact, this resolution, but what it did do was give encouragement to the racist aspects of our culture and selves. It abdicated compassion, even as it ironically lauded it as compassionate. It surrendered imagination and puzzle solving and goodness. It dehumanized, and dehumanization costs lives. No more so at the moment than in the city of Rafah. I can no longer hide behind my very real ignorance about the factors underlying and compelling that slaughter. The historical and geopolitical ignorance is on my part, real. But so is the slaughter. Traumatized as they may be, the state of Israel cannot continue killing 250 men, women, and children a day. I actually don't want your applause. I don't want your applause for that. I don't know what that does, and that's not why I'm saying this. So this is multiple more death per square city block than the infamous bombing of Dresden, and that's the highest kill rate of any conflict this century. And it's mostly civilian, and it's got to stop. And I offer no solution but cessation. It's a simple notion. Stop killing people. Stop bombing, stop colonizing, stop shooting, stop bullying, stop dehumanizing. Ceasefire in Rafah, ceasefire in Gaza, in Ukraine, on our southern border, in Oklahoma, and in Colorado Springs, ceasefire. It's heartbreaking and it feels so overwhelming. The impact of dehumanization causes a wave of hate and violence against which I feel wholly impotent of any systemic or political effectiveness. And this is why I don't want applause right now. Like Netanyahu doesn't care that we're clapping. Governor Stitt of Oklahoma doesn't care what I say. The scale of it all seems impenetrable and invulnerable, unassailable, but it doesn't mean that we are without agency or ability to help. It means that we have to build from the roots so the fruit of our lives is sweet and nourishing and not toxic. And here's the root. Everyone needs to be loved. Everyone deserves love. Everyone deserves love. Everyone deserves our tenderness and our humor and our hope. And there are so many who do not get it from their family or their history or their culture. So I want to say, if you have not gotten the love that you need, I hope that you find some of it here today. I hope you can give some of it here. Even if it's to the person that drives you crazy here. Everyone deserves love. Amen. I've had that, is it Robert Smith? Like, I am human and I need to be loved just like everybody else does. Like, that's been in my dreams. So this is a place to practice love with each other so that we can take love into the world. It's a place to cultivate and fortify ourselves with the spirit of love, the spirit of creativity and generosity, a spirit that fortifies us to engage with a human world that too often falls prey to a cycle of violence, when love is the only remedy. Let us call to that spirit and hope by our gathered voices, that it will fill and soothe and empower and compel us.
We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote: 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person; 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations; 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations; 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning; 5, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. These principles are why I am a Unitarian Universalist. They constitute a framework within which we can make ourselves and the world better, even though we don't all agree on fundamental issues. How did I get to be a UU? It's a long story, but it started in 1975 when I was a graduate student in Fort Collins. It was a bad time in my life, and a fellow student invited me to go to church with him, to Foothills Unitarian Church. Hint, invite your friends to church. I went to the church several times and went to a few meetings at the minister's house. The minister was the Reverend Walter Royal Jones, Jr., who in the early 80s chaired the committee that wrote the UU principles I previously read and that are summarized on the walls of All Souls right there. Did I join the church? Of course not. I was young. I had things to do. Okay. But I said to myself, these UUs have got something. In 1989, I lived in Greeley, was married, had children, and was looking for something for them. Hint, children are the reason a lot of us are here. We need to invest more in religious education. I suggested to my wife, Bobby Poole, who's attending by Zoom today, hello dear, that we might investigate the UU Church of Greeley. She went, they sang Spirit of Life, and we've been UUs ever since. Hint, music is important. Music says things that you can't say any other way. I never did make a pledge to my Greeley church. We joined in the fall, and they didn't ask for a pledge until the spring pledge drive, just like we do. By that time, we knew that we were moving, so we didn't pledge. I did put money in the plate, but not enough. My first pledge came probably 2 years later when Mike Scarborough of the UU Church of Huntsville, Alabama, where I was a member, came to my house to explain why a pledge was necessary. Hint, your pledge is necessary. See me in the small hall after the service and I'll explain if you like. If you haven't pledged already, do it today. This is the last Sunday of this year's pledge drive. Here's how you pledge. You can do, it's not on the thing there. Oh, thank you. Great. You can either do it online, asuuc.net/pledge. You can fill out a paper pledge form. There's pledge forms. They look like the one on the left there, and the pew boxes. Okay, if you don't have one, I've got some back there. I'll be back there after the service. You can email your pledge to stewardship@asuuc.org, or you can telephone the church office with your pledge. I'll be glad to talk with you in the small hall after the service. I'll be right by the drop box out there where you can put your completed pledge forms in, or you can email me at stewardship@asuuc.org. Thank you.
Every community survives only by the generosity of its members. And now you can demonstrate that. Instructions for giving will be on the screen and in the chat online on Zoom. Thank you.
All right, we got 15 minutes to finish this thing, and newsflash, I hope you're comfortable. All right, so before we get into the meat of the reflection, I just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of the big picture as I see it right now in terms of where we are, where I am with you as a community, a religious community. And I'm going to start just by pointing to next year. Next year, we will have the same liturgical calendar that we had this year. So the water, communion, and the all this. Remember the dance. We'll keep doing that dance. next year, just like we did this year. Thematically, however, we're going to move into reflections about non-reactivity, church systems, and more justice-oriented reflections. And I just want to assure you of that, because we're not doing that for the rest of this year necessarily. So that's coming. Programmatically, much of what we start this year, including the Theology on Tap and the upcoming Fire Tenders programs and other adult programming, that will pick up and continue apace. We'll rerun those things next year, or many of them anyway. And that also goes for the perspectives that we're exploring in these reflections and in those adult program offerings. We'll continue to explore them and practice bits that seem right and good. I want to assure you that I'm not going to ever give you fascination and self-congratulations. That is anathema to religious community. My assumption and encouragement is that you come here for either sanctuary or to do the work of connection. So this year, I sort of have conceived of as an intro to my spiritual framing, the way that I engage with spirit, and an invitation for you to entertain that point of view. And which leads us to today, which is sort of the beginning of, I think, what turns out to be sort of a 4-part sermon series that are all quite related and might get pretty out there. So that'll be fun. All right, so despite what I said in the call to all souls, I actually believe that we humans wish to be good to one another and want to be treated kindly. And generally speaking, we do take care of each other. We take care of our friends, we take care of our elders, and we take care of our children. But we do not take care of our aging elders and our children because we own them. We take care of them, would even give our lives for them because we love them. Love, right? Not possession. Relationship, not ownership. And while that's only obvious, it is an important thing for me to keep in mind as I engage with what I think is a planet and soul-saving question. As if soul and planet were extricable from one another. So the question is, as a proper UU, it's a question with a lot of clauses in it, so. The question is, given our colonial ancestry and present mobility, how do we come to feel truly at home, beloved of place, wherever we live, with deep and reciprocal integrity? How do we love Earth? How do we become embedded rather than exploitative? How do we become indigenous, which is to say generated by a place without being invaders? How do we find home through giving and receiving love rather than ownership? This is a question that I engage with quite a bit. I think we have by and large forgotten how to do this, and the consequences have been catastrophic. True, home still sometimes happens for us as individuals, though that is more often by happenstance and duration than by intention, much less procedure and protocol. I would argue that until our culture rediscovers the solution to this question and moves that solution to the center of our being, we will continue to go down a ruinous road. How do we become home? Now, of course, sometimes ruin is opportunity. The cracks are where the light gets in. And there are cracks aplenty in our crumbling paradigm that brought us to this moment. And not all of them are even all that painful. Some cracks are even entertaining. For instance, with the advent of podcasts and audiobooks and YouTube, and the diminishment of print media and newspapers, and to some degree, even reading books, we have, as a culture, taken a partial turn back to orality. So this is a medium of information exchange that, while never entirely done away with, has played second fiddle to the written word for about 400 years. Ever since Gutenberg made mass literacy accessible and advantageous. Some have lamented this drift away from literacy. However, I would suggest that this organic shift, subtle as it is, back to orality speaks, no pun intended, to a way of being that may inform that planet-saving question. So how does the written word impact our ability to be at home without ownership? Okay, so to explore that question, here we go down the rabbit hole. We first have to set the stage with a tip of the cap to oral traditions. We of the written word and Google Cloud may be amazed at the amount of information that can be stored, accessed, and conveyed without scripts and codes. So the Navajo are reported to have had a fairly detailed knowledge of over 700 insects. Now that data set included key entomological attributes and impacts, of course, but they were also frequently cross-referenced with mythologically coded ethics, truth, and other information. So insects became memory palaces for cultural knowledge, and cultural knowledge became a memory palace for insect data. And that's just insects, a tiny slice of the amount of information they were able to store and convey without writing. Australian Aboriginal memory systems accurately relate changes to the landscape dating back some 10,000 years. So imagine knowing the history of this place where you sit right now, as well as you know the history of your immediate family, but extending back to twice the age of the earliest pyramid. Not just knowing it as trivia, but as interlaced with cultural knowledge, agricultural application, and identity signposts. Not just knowledge, but a plan, a reality. So similar astounding feats of data management can be found the world over in oral systems. And the common thread seems to be the investment of story into sensual material. Be it a mountain, a bead, an insect, or a boomerang, or an empty gong. It's a potent brew of incredibly deep capacity. And of course, we were all oral ancestrally, but our paths diverged. The earliest form of writing was, more art than script. So as we departed from our oral tradition and developed a written tradition, the first thing we did was take images of the natural world and use them to record events, to tell stories and convey information. Images were derivative of the physical world. They looked like things, right? Like if you wanted to tell a story about a microphone, you would draw a microphone. But over time, these pictures morphed into what are called ideograms, where a word was more of a symbolic representation than a depiction of the thing it represented. So now you can think of Chinese characters. So one of the earliest ideographic writing systems is a big info dump, but we're going someplace. One of the earliest ideographic writing systems arose in Egypt some 5,000 years ago. And it's important to keep in mind that ideographic images are still more imitative than abstract, and so are rather closely bound to the sensual world. So the trouble with this system is that it means that only a few professional elites could actually operate it. And there's just too many words, each requiring their own specific ideogram. A Chinese dictionary compiled in the early 1700s listed well over 40,000 different ideographic characters, which were then combined to make words. So while ideograms are great for conveying ideas that are, if you'll pardon the expression, literal depictions of something like a dog or rice or running, it leaves a lot out. So it's hard to depict compassion, growth, life, love. So writing evolved, actually, you're going to love this, to make use of puns. For example, the Sumerian word for life is pronounced T, I think. That's what the book said. This is conveyed in writing by adapting and contextualizing the ideograph for arrow, which was also arrow, pronounced T. So T for arrow, T for life. So then an arrow depiction becomes the word for life. So these puns, like you need to know this, are called rebuses and represent an order of abstraction away from the literal representation, away from writing being directly linked with the sensual world. And this is a key step. So I got a lot of this information, by the way, from David Abram's Spell of the Sensuous. Abram points out that the rebuses eventually evolved into, another word, syllabaries or something like that, systems of writing that are linked more to the sound of the word than the word it signifies. So there's another abstraction out of ecology. From syllabaries, it is a very short journey to the alphabet, or rather the first into the alphabet, or alphabet of the Hebrews, which had obvious influence on the alphabet of the Greeks, which then becomes our own, a writing system wholly abstracted from the world that it signifies. To spell apple, unless you know the letters, gives you no clue that it's an apple, right? This is quite distinct from the world, and this reflects, reinforces, and crafts a way of being in the world that is out of the world. Writing changed how we related to reality. It changed our minds, our sense of meaning and connection. We're no longer embedded in an animated world of which we were a function. For instance, the particular spiritual presence of a place or being was displaced and abstracted into the idea of the holy and repositioned as a universal divine so obtuse and not of this world that you were not permitted to utter its name. Writing birthed God. There also seems to be some correlation between writing and the development of mass agriculture and large concentrations of people. In other words, writing co-evolved with the objectification and exploitation of the ecosphere. In contrast with oral information systems, writing extricated and isolated, and in so doing disassociated us from that of which we are a part. It correlates with the rise of the paradigm of separation and domination. It presaged the creation of capital, which is the abstraction of value from material, and even as it gutted matter of agency and personality. Writing abstracts us out of ecology and turns our beautiful world, our mother, our home, into an other, to be subdued, exploited, owned, or defended against. Despite those grievances, which are profound, it is also true that the perks of writing are as innumerable as its failings are profound. I love writing. But in writing, and I hope this isn't terribly maddening to you, I hope that my rhythm and cadence, my alliteration, convey a mood and jourve that returns some more than intellectual experience to the data conveyed. right? Like I hope that the sound of the words that I'm speaking carries some sort of meaning beyond the literal words that I'm uttering or reading. I hope the contents are relevant and the contours are beautiful. There is much benefit, art, and beauty in the written word, and the program would not be to eliminate writing. The program would be, as with any powerful substance, to embrace the good of it and become aware of its dangers, to scaffold it, or in this case, balance it with a reinvestment in the primacy of the oral. So, I submit to you, and am neither original nor alone in doing so, that our memory systems required, or that the memory systems required of oral cultures are part and parcel with their integrity with the ecosystem. The way that they kept knowledge in orality connected them with the ecosphere. The memory systems, I suspect, of oral mnemonic strategies, right? Mnemonic is memory, establish and secure their indigeneity and bind them to place, infuse life with meaning and matter with agency. That's key, and I don't want to bury it too far. Infuse matter with agency. Now, I've witnessed that when you invest story into matter, it opens a connection. Then matter, or more likely the innumerable systems that you manifest as matter in any given moment, matter talks back and invests in you. So this is a cultivation of interbeing, the impact on meaning and identity of interdependence. That's a lot of syllables. And that's how we save the world. As the world saves us, this is how we move from exploitation to integrity, from ownership to love, from colonists to homegrown. Invest story into the physical surround, cultivate relationship, and fall in love. Can this be programmatized? Well, I guess we'll find out. I want to think about it a little more. I don't want to make more mistakes fixing the old mistakes, but at some point, and some point soon, it's time to start running the experiment. To invest story into matter and see what happens. By the way, our holy days, that cultivation of spaciousness is part of this, because we need to make room to notice. After we invest, we have to have that muscle of room making and listening and noticing where we are, right? So holy days is actually the first step in this process. I've got some other ideas, maybe I should write them down. Remain standing for the benediction as we leave this place that we've created together with our intention, with the stories that we bring and invest here into this building and into one another. Let us go knowing that the world awaits and wants us to be in love with it. Let's go shine our love on each other and those we meet throughout the week until we gather again. Go in peace. Let's go singing.